If you think you already know what the Seahawks are going to do in this draft, think again, because what just came out about a possible trade with a division rival could completely change everything tonight. The Seattle Seahawks are heading into the 2026 NFL Draft with a level of intrigue that you can feel building across the entire league. And the biggest storyline right now centers around something John Schneider didn't just hint at, he essentially confirmed. This team is actively trying to trade back from pick number 32. That alone already shifts the entire strategy for Seattle. But what really takes this to another level is the potential trade partner that's emerging. A team inside the division, the Arizona Cardinals. If you're part of the 12s and you can feel something big coming, hit that like button and drop "Go Hawks" in the comments right now. At first glance, trading within the division sounds unlikely, almost off-limits in most cases, but when you dig deeper into the current situation, it actually starts to make a lot of sense. The Cardinals are aggressively looking for a quarterback, and all signs are pointing toward Ty Simpson as their guy. They're not being subtle about it either. There's a real urgency from Arizona to move up and secure him, especially when you consider the value of that fifth-year option tied to first-round picks. If they wait until the second round, that advantage disappears, and in today's NFL, that extra year of control over a quarterback can be everything. Now, from Seattle's perspective, this creates an opportunity. Schneider has already made it clear the Seahawks want more picks, and with only 4 selections currently, moving back becomes almost a necessity rather than a luxury. If Arizona is willing to pay a reasonable price to jump up and secure Simpson, Seattle can capitalize by adding draft capital without necessarily missing out on key talent tiers. And here's where things get even more interesting. Around the league, there's also chatter about the New York Jets potentially entering the picture, possibly using pick 33 as leverage if Simpson is still on the board. But some insiders believe the Jets may be looking ahead to 2027 for their quarterback solution, which reduces the immediate competition for Arizona and makes a Seahawks-Cardinals deal even more realistic. If that trade does happen, Seattle could be in a position to still land a high-impact player, especially considering how unpredictable this draft class has become. One name that continues to surface is cornerback Chris Johnson out of San Diego State. Just weeks ago, he was projected well outside Seattle's reach, potentially going in the teens or early 20s. Now, suddenly, there's growing belief he could fall all the way to pick 32. Johnson brings a skill set that fits exactly what the Seahawks need right now. He's a fluid athlete, aggressive in coverage, and not afraid to challenge bigger receivers. More importantly, he has a natural ability to create turnovers and make impactful plays on the ball. Coming off a season where he earned Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year honors, he's proven he can dominate, even if the level of competition raises some questions. And let's not overlook the context here. With Rick Woolen no longer on the roster after leaving in free agency, there's a clear need at cornerback. If Johnson is available and Seattle still holds that pick, it becomes a very logical move. But that's the key question. Will the Seahawks even stay at 32 long enough to make that decision? Because while Johnson represents a safer projection, there's another name that introduces a completely different level of risk and reward: Jermod McCoy. This is where things start to get complicated. McCoy missed the entire season with a torn ACL, and now there are additional concerns about cartilage issues in his knee. That's not a minor detail. It's something that could impact his long-term durability in a significant way. But at the same time, when you evaluate pure talent, McCoy might be the best player in this entire draft class. Without the injury concerns, he's not just a first-round pick. He's likely a top 10 selection, possibly even higher. So now the Seahawks are faced with a classic draft dilemma. Do you play it safe, or do you swing for elite upside? If McCoy somehow falls to 32 and Seattle hasn't traded back, this becomes one of the toughest decisions of the night. Because if he stays healthy, you're potentially adding a game-changing defensive piece to a unit that already has versatility with players like Devin Witherspoon and others capable of moving across multiple roles. But if the knee issues persist, you've used a valuable first-round pick on a player who may never fully reach his potential. And that tension doesn't stop there. The Seahawks are also being heavily linked to running back Jadarian Price, a player some believe could sneak into the first round, largely because of Seattle's perceived need at the position. There's a growing narrative that the Seahawks don't have a choice but to address running back early, though not everyone agrees with that assessment. From a roster-building standpoint, spending first-round capital on a running back is always a debated move, especially when there may be comparable value available later in the draft. While Price has talent, explosiveness, and potential to lead a backfield, the question remains whether that's the best use of pick 32, particularly for a team with multiple areas to address. And just when you think you've mapped out the possibilities, another layer gets added. There's also buzz about the Jacksonville Jaguars exploring a move back into the first round, with Seattle emerging as a potential trade partner. That opens yet another path where the Seahawks could move down, accumulate more assets, and still target players like Chris Johnson, Cassius Howe, or others who fit their system and long-term vision. So as we sit here on draft day, the reality is this. The Seahawks are one of the most unpredictable teams in the first round. They could trade back with Arizona, they could deal with Jacksonville, they could stay put and grab a falling talent, or they could take a calculated risk on a player with elite upside but medical concerns. Every option is on the table, and that's what makes this moment so compelling for Seahawks fans. The decisions made tonight won't just shape this roster for the upcoming season, they could define the trajectory of this team for years to come. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the Seahawks should trade back and build more depth, or stay at 32 and take the best player available no matter what? And when you start connecting all these dots, it becomes clear that Seattle isn't just reacting to how the board might fall, they're positioning themselves to control it. That's the key difference here compared to previous drafts. This front office, led by John Schneider, is signaling flexibility and, more importantly, confidence in their evaluations beyond just the first round. Because if they do move back, especially in a deal with a team like the Cardinals or Jaguars, what they're really betting on is their ability to find starters and impact players in that next tier. And historically, that's something Seattle has done well when they've had multiple picks to work with. The challenge this year is that they don't currently have that volume, which is exactly why trading back feels less like an option and more like a strategy they're determined to execute. Now let's bring it back to the names we've been discussing, because this is where the draft board could really break in Seattle's favor. If Chris Johnson is sitting there, and the Seahawks have moved back just a few spots while adding extra picks, that's a win on multiple levels. You fill a major positional need at cornerback, you replace the production lost with Rick Woolen's departure, and you still walk away with additional assets to address other areas later. At the same time, if Germod McCoy somehow continues to slide, he becomes that wild card that could completely redefine this draft for Seattle. Imagine a scenario where the Seahawks trade back, pick up another second-rounder, and still land McCoy, because teams ahead of them are scared off by the medicals. That's the kind of move that can turn a good draft into a franchise-altering one. But again, it all comes down to how comfortable this organization feels about his long-term health, because that risk is very real and can't be ignored. Then there's the running back situation, which continues to divide opinions. The national narrative is pushing Jadarian Price toward Seattle, almost as if it's inevitable. But internally, the decision might not be nearly as straightforward. The Seahawks could very well believe that players like Emmanuel Wilson and George Holani can hold things down enough to avoid forcing a pick at running back in the first round. And if that's the case, passing on price early and targeting value later becomes a much more logical approach. What's interesting is how all these scenarios intersect. If Seattle trades back and accumulates picks, suddenly taking a running back in the second round feels much more reasonable. If they stay at 32 and the board doesn't fall their way at other positions, maybe that's when price enters the conversation. But as things stand, it doesn't feel like a move they're eager to make unless the value lines up perfectly. And don't forget about players like Cassius Howe, who might not be the headline name right now, but could end up being one of those selections that fans look back on and say, that's where the Seahawks quietly got better. His ability to get after the quarterback, his development across different levels of competition, and his clear interest in being part of this organization all make him a very intriguing fit, especially if Seattle adds more picks and has the flexibility to target upside later in the draft. All of this points to one central theme: unpredictability. The Seahawks are not locked into one path. They've created multiple avenues depending on how the board unfolds, and that's exactly where you want to be on draft night. Whether it's a division trade that surprises everyone, a calculated gamble on elite talent with injury concerns, or a disciplined move to build depth across the roster, every decision will reflect a bigger picture approach. And as the first round unfolds, keep a close eye on those teams trying to move up. Because if Arizona gets aggressive for Ty Simpson, or if Jacksonville follows through on their reported interest in jumping back into the first round, Seattle is sitting right in the perfect spot to take advantage. That number 32 pick isn't just a selection, it's leverage. So now, it all comes down to execution. The plan is there, the opportunities are there, and the league is watching closely to see how the Seahawks play this. Will they stick to their approach and trade back? Will they seize the moment if a top-tier talent falls into their lap? Or will they surprise everyone with a move no one saw coming? Make sure you're locked in, because this is shaping up to be one of the most important draft nights in recent Seahawks history. Subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and click the video that's on your screen right now to stay updated with everything happening in real time, because the latest Seahawks news, analysis, and behind-the-scenes insights, you're only going to find it right here. Go Seahawks!